Welcome back, everybody. This is the Me, Myself, and I playthrough of the game Unconditional Surrender, the main event scenario. The game is published by GMT Games, designed by Salvatore Vasta. We're about ready to embark on the Soviet operations phase. I thought I would take a couple minutes here and talk a little bit about the Russian front and at least how I see the Russians being able to hold off on another German onslaught in 1942. If you look at their national will, they have 41 national will. The rules state that if I can make it to January of 1943 with at least one will point, I no longer have to check my willpower. So that's my goal. Looking around the map, there's a possibility that I might lose Kursk and Orel, maybe Rostov, possibly Rezev, and in the worst case scenario, the two northern cities up here. So that would be 6 cities, which is 12 willpower. I don't think the Germans can get much farther than that. With that in mind, I just need to make sure that I don't lose more than about 4 or 5 infantry every turn during clear weather, and I should have, right around 10 willpower left come 1943. That's in worst case scenario. Germans getting a lot of 6-1 splits and all sorts of things like that. So with that in mind, I'm going to continue my slow but steady advances here in the east. This is my last turn of weather where they're severe. Germans are severe and I'm at poor. You'll notice the last couple of turns, I have the shock armies at the front. This is the one time where the shock armies really shine because in poor weather they give you +2 when they're adding to an assault, and they're also elite, so they can 2 of them can start off with a +3 assault. Poor weather makes it -1, but if you have an airplane or an extra infantry unit that you can throw a tanks marker on, you can get to like +4s against the Germans, which are halved. Even if they're +2 and halved, you tend to be able to at least get a retreat. So, with that sort of backdrop of this is the reason why I'm playing the Russians the way I am. I'm not super aggressive, but I'm somewhat aggressive. I'm trying to take any 3-hex assault that I can get, specifically the one around Kursk. If I can push back the 15th, or what? No, that's the 10th. If I can push back the 10th, I'll have a sort of a cushion between me and Kursk when he starts to do his attacks in a couple of turns. One thing to also note is that on the weather track, if you look at the player aid card, over here on March and April, which are going to be the next months coming up, in the cold zone, it's either going to be poor or severe. One turn it'll be one of those, whatever we roll, and then the other turn it will be the other one, because of the new weather rules. So I have at least 2 more turns of not having to deal with German super advances because of clear weather. So the Russians will start off by doing a couple of moves here. They're going to activate the 4th for a point and move the guy in Kursk down here to 2954, and then they're going to activate the 1st shock army and move it into Kursk and call for an assault. If I can find an assault marker that fits that direction, which I can't. I don't know what I did with them all. Oh, there it is. I knew I had one around here somewhere. He calls for an assault, and then I also will activate the 2nd shock army to call for an assault on the 10th army here. For another one, and then another one to activate the 37th infantry and have it do an assault. So right now, by having the 37th infantry be the primary, and then adding in 2 shock armies, I'm at +4. The Germans are at +2, but they'll be halved. And then I also have on my faction card a couple of tank markers that I can add in. So I'm going to go ahead and resolve this attack right now because it might change some of my moves in the future. So we're going to throw the tanks army out here, or tanks marker, and just go through that. The Russians would have been a +4. They get an extra +1 for the tank. Their aircraft, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, can't quite reach from the south. That was calculated by the Germans, by the way. So I'm at a +5, and then I'm -1 for poor weather. The Germans are naturally a +2, but their die roll will be halved. So we're going to go ahead and resolve this assault and see what I can do. The Russians roll a 3 +4 makes it a 7. And the Germans roll a 2 +2 is a 4, halved to a 2. So we go look at the combat results table, and a 7 to a 2 is another DD result. So not only did I retreat him, but I reduced his strength by 1. He only has one legal retreat route, 2915. And put these assault markers away, because we don't need to have them on top of these guys anymore. Oh, wrong way. There we go. And then I will advance in the... oh God, what is that? I have a terrible time reading when they're activated. The first shock army will advance into 2851. That gives me sort of a buffer. Another bad weather turn, and maybe I can push the 17th out and just kind of slowly but surely push down on the German line. Let's get this tanks marker back on the turn track for next turn. And that kind of takes care of that. Now that leads me to having to activate the 12th Army. What do I do with my national tracks? There they are. So now I'm down to 15 with the Russians. And I move him up here adjacent to the Romanians. Now I could try to call for an assault on the Romanians. I would be +1 because I have a buddy, and I could throw a tanks marker on one of them, so I'd be +2, -1. I'd be +1. Probably might get lucky and take that out. I'm going to call for the assault from this guy that I just... I should activate him. I'm going to call for an assault for now. I'm not sure I'm actually going to activate the 30th and do that assault, because I have something a little more interesting that I'd like to try to do up here. In the same vein, this time I can actually add in an airplane. So I'm going to actually activate a couple of guys here. Going to activate the 30th, and he's going to basically move back to 2252, kind of setting up for the future offensive from the Germans. Then I will activate the 3rd Shock Army for another one, and he will go 1, 2, 3, and then it's 4, 5 for the Panzer and 6 for the what you call it, the Hex, because it costs 2 to attack a unit in poor weather. And I don't seem to have one of those. So let's clone this, move this here. So that's an assault. Then I'm going to spend my last one here on the 4th Shock Army to activate him and put an assault here. Now I am not going to take 2048 because I'm right at 12 production points. And I have 4 aircraft, so in order to get all my aircraft down some sorties, I really can't spend any more. So this assault against the Romanians probably won't take place. It's probably a frivolous attack, but maybe I can coax him into using his ground support there. Anyway, so we're going to resolve this attack here. Now, the Germans don't have any aircraft to intercept me, so I'm going to go ahead and use this aircraft up here that had 5 sorties, put it up to 6. He'll add 1 because of poor weather. So I will start off with a +1 because I'm Shock Army Elite. I get +2 for adding in another shock army in poor weather, and another +1 for the airplane. I have to subtract 1 for poor weather. So the Germans are a 2 and I'm a +3, but they're halved. So the idea here is maybe I can, force another retreat here and take the hex with a shock army threatening to possibly set up something in Smolensk next turn. We'll see how that works out. If I do it, I'm kind of leaving myself open to some bad things, but let's see what the die roll is first. So the Russians roll at +3, a 5 +3, which is a net of 8, and the Germans roll a 3 +2, which is 5, halved to 2.5 rounds up to 3. So we'll go look at the combat results table, and an 8 to a 3 is another DD result. So we flipped the Panzer and forced him to retreat. And now the question is whether we want to take the hex or not. Part of me says yes. Part of me says no, because if I go in there and I don't move any infantry up to take advantage of it, I would end up with not being able to retreat the unit because he could move in such a way as to cut off my retreat route. I wouldn't be isolated because I'd be adjacent to someone, but not being able to retreat a shock army, they cost extra production points if they actually get eliminated somehow. So now I have the quandary of do I go ahead and move ahead infantry units to plug the line, so to speak, or do I make sure I can bring up all 4 of my airplanes? Because I did so well there, my thought is that I'm going to go ahead and move the shock army into 2248 from 2149. He's going to take the hex. I'm going to forego bringing up one of my airplanes, probably the guy who has 5. I'll leave him at 5. And instead, I'm going to move some infantry, like the 23rd, or the 23rd and the 51st. The 23rd is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, adjacent to Smolensk where the Hungarians are. And the 31st is just going to move 1 square up. We're not going to call for any assaults there. But since I've spent 2 more, and I basically have 1 more, and I can still do my 3 of my aircraft, I'm going to go ahead and call this assault on the Romanians. I'm going to add in the 30th. And put my points down to 9. And this will be the last assault that the Russians will do, or moves. They will use their last tanks marker. And now this is a little tricksy thing. You put the tanks marker on the guy who you're going to call as the primary. Come on, tanks marker. I'm going to put it down here so I can get it on the turn track easier. Whichever one you declare as the primary, you put the tanks marker on there because that gives him a +1 going in, and he gets +1 for his buddy. Oh, that's the wrong assault marker. Yeah, there we go. So this tanks marker is going to be on whatever number this is, 12th maybe. And he's the primary, so that gives me a +1. And the Germans start out at 0. And then I throw in another tanks marker on the guy, or not tanks marker, but the guy that's adding into the combat gives me an extra +1. So now I'm +2, so I have to subtract 1 for weather, so I'm only a +1. The Iranians started at 0, and we have. They could throw in a ground support marker, but I kind of want to hang on to that for possibly the Finns, or maybe this Romanian across the strait, in case I haven't remembered something, or maybe even the Hungarians if they manage to not be able to get out of the line. So we're going to just take it as a +1 to a 0, and the 0 is halved. The Russians roll a 4, plus 1 is a 5. So, and the Romanians roll 2, halved is a 1. A 5 to a 1 is a retreat, so the Romanian will back up, and then the guy who had gotten pushed back before, takes a unit, will move in. So that's the 12th takes back the hex that he was pushed out of. Now that kind of sets me up with a 3-hex attack in a couple of places from the Germans. But the Germans now have to spend 3 points to rebuild their flipped infantry and armor. So maybe I've kept him from doing something with some airplanes. The German has 19 points, so he's definitely going to end up either not doing his airplane or something. I think I worked that out well, in that the Germans have to make a decision in replacements phase. And then we got to put this tanks marker on the turn track for our next turn, which we'll be getting to very shortly. That takes care of that. And that's basically the Russian turn. They've pushed back 3 hexes this turn. I've pushed back a couple of hexes in previous turns. So it's not a huge rolling offensive, but I have given myself some breathing room around Kursk and Orel, and kind of pushed the center back almost to the... I'm at the edge of Smolensk right now, so the Germans have to think about doing something about all of this somewhere, somehow. We check the Russian supply. They're all in supply. They don't have anybody cut off. And that ends the operations phase for the Soviets. So we'll go into the no supply phase. There's nobody with a no supply marker on them, so we don't have to do anything there. And now we're to the replacements for the Axis. This kind of hurts the Axis. They were hoping to get like all their planes up and build a new one. So they're not going to be able to do that. They are definitely... they really want to get that airplane out and available for the Russian front, or Italy. I haven't figured out where I'm going to put it yet. But I am in the replacements phase. I am going to spend 1 for the infantry, 2 for the armor, and then I have 3 planes on the eastern front, I think. 1, 2, 3 planes on the eastern front. So that's another 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And now I'll go flip a bunch of units. These guys each get 2 sorties back. And then I flipped my flipped units back to their full strength. So yeah, it's kind of ucky, but it's about the best I can do at this point. That leaves me with 7. Is that right? 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. And I was at 19, so I have 7 left. It costs 3 to bring in my airplane, so I actually can go over here and clear 2 sorties on this western... I can't find him. Where'd he go? There he is. So I'll bring him down to 2 sorties. Maybe. If I can press the right buttons. For another 3. 2, 3. So it leaves me with 4. And that'll be enough for me to build that airplane with 4 sorties when we get to that phase. Now we have to go look at the Italians and all of their terrible things that they have to do. They have 11 because they didn't move anybody. They could have actually moved an infantry unit, couldn't they have? Oh, well. Or I did. I did move an infantry unit. So I was at 12, and I spent 1 for an 11. So I could have moved another infantry unit, but it's kind of a pointless endeavor at this point. With 11, I have to make a decision. My decision is going to be kind of probably not what you would expect. I am going to take the 2 sorties off here. I just keep forgetting that goes around the corner. And 2 sorties from here. And then I'm also going to bring this fleet down because good weather is coming in the Med, and I'm going to need my fleets as close to full as possible. I will pick up the airplane next turn. So that was 1, 2, 3 for a convoy, 1, 2, 3 for a convoy, and 1, 2, 3, 4 for a fleet. So the Italians are at 1. Yay. And that ends the Axis replacement phase. Now we got to do the Western's replacement phase. They actually did a little bit of movement here, so they got to... Well, first off, the U.S. Just takes back its sorties. And then we have to look at the British. They have 15. So if they went 3, 6... So I'm thinking they go here for 3 for sure, and 3 on the airplane, get it close to full. So that's 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That leaves me with 9. This fleet's in pretty good shape vis-a-vis the Italians. So I think I'm going to go ahead and spend 5 on 2, 3, 4, 5. And bring down... He should have been at 6. Which comes down to 4. I think he should have been at 6 from my move from Malta to here previously. So I'm going to say he's at 4. I'll double check, but I'm pretty sure that that's a true statement. I still have 4 left. I don't have anything to build this turn. So I'm actually going to work on the fleet in Edinburgh and bring it down. Or should I do the airplane? No, I'll do the fleet because I might not have 4 again for a while like that. And that's the British replacement phase. The Russians have to pick 3 airplanes that they can replace. Get rid of all this. So they're going to do these airplanes up here and the one in the center here, and we'll leave the one in the south with 5 sorties. So we're a little behind the Germans on the sortie, but we managed to push 3 X's and did some damage to the German army, so that's worthwhile. That takes me down to 0. Now you might be wondering, why am I not saving points to build out these 4 Russian infantry? I look at those 4 Russian infantry as my emergency mobilization. The Germans make some kind of a breakthrough, and I don't have the ability to move units because they've pinned other things or cut things off. I would be able to build 4 guys in cities right in front of whatever the Germans are trying to do, which should give me enough time to move things in and fill in the line. So that's why you don't see me building those 4 units. They're sort of my emergency mobilization. We get to 1943, if I still have some units on the board, you'll see me getting them off the card and on the board so that I can trade them out for guards units and things like that. But right now, I need them in case I need to fill in a hole that gets created by the Germans that I just don't see right now. Which, I probably won't see till I'm looking at it from the Germans' point of view. There is no upgrades. Mobilization. The Axis did have a mobilization because they still have an airplane, and they have 4 left, so they spend 3. And they can go get that stinking airplane of theirs. Let's go see where I want to place it. I think I'm going to go ahead and place it in Königsberg. I think I need it in the east for 42. I've pretty much given up the idea of conquering the Middle East. I keep telling myself I'm going to do it differently every time I play, and I always get sucked into sending the Africa army down there. The proper way to do it, I think, to truly threaten the Middle East is to take 2 German infantry instead and send the Africa to Russia, where its movement points are more important. Because with 2 German infantry units down there, that's 2 units at +2 that can attack like 2 or 3 times, depending on how far they have to move to get into contact. That gives you way more attacks than just the Africa army. You need 2 German units, and if you're going to spend 2 production points to do something in the Middle East anyway, to me, you want to send 2 infantry, because even the Italian air with the, countering British air somewhat, can actually make with multiple attacks. You can get through the British tank markers and possibly take a hex or 3. So maybe next game I'll do it that way. But I've pretty much given up any hope of being able to pull anything off down there. At least unless the British evacuate everything and just leave garrisons to defend it, but I don't think that's going to happen. So that's the mobilization phase. Nobody else has anything to either mobilize or spend money on. We aren't talking, so no diplomacy phase. The victory check phase, they haven't conquered Germany yet, so it's not over. And we go to the end of turn phase. So the Russians will get back their tanks markers here off the turn track. A lot of stuff's going to happen here. The Russians get their tanks markers. 1, 2, 3 tanks markers. They get a Urals factory, so move the counter here up 2. Pull up their national track and take their extra Urals factory marker up another one. So they're up to +5 Urals factories. The Germans got their surprise attack mark back. The British got an Ultra. The Germans got a submarine. Well, we know where those will be spent next turn. And the British got the all-important Free Forces. Free Forces is basically an extra +1, but it could take up to 6 turns to get it back. But it's nice to have that if you're only at having to attack across the river or something. It can get rid of that -1, or into a city. It can get rid of that -1, and it can make a difference. So I've seen it make a difference several times in games that I've played. So that then is the end of February 1942. We will begin with March of 1942. We probably will keep these splits depending on what the Germans do, and if they can get the turn in like 20 some minutes, then I'll probably do the West, because they don't do a lot right now. Basically, they're going to line up to go after the Germans in North Africa. So we will begin with the weather phase of March 1942 when we come back to the next episode. This is the Me, Myself, and I playthrough of the main event scenario of Unconditional Surrender. I'm Dren608. Thanks for watching my videos. Please leave comments, good or bad. Need to know what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. And if you like what you see and don't want to miss any episodes in the future, please subscribe. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.